2009. The first item of business is public comment. Is there anyone here for public comment who wishes to speak? No. Okay. Yes, Mr. DeForest is...
Mr. DeForest has had a very serious family problem.
Oh.
And so he called me this morning and said that he was really, really sorry that he wasn't going to be able to make it.
Well, I'm sorry that he won't be here. The next item of business, then, will be approval of minutes from May 13th, 2009.
So moved. Second.
Are there any revisions or changes or questions?
I have one.
Good. Mr. Schallenberger?
Page 7. There was, under the tree item, discussion item, item 1 of the commission comments, I thought that we had made a recommendation to the ordinance committee to incorporate the like species into the findings that are made when a proposed tree removal comes before the committee. No?
That was discussed, I do remember.
But that didn't make it into our comments?
No.
Okay.
Are there any other comments or revisions?
So, Madam Chair, would you like to add are you saying there was a comment that was made that was not included in the minutes?
There was discussion about the item that Mr. Schallenberger, but we didn't actually make it a comment.
I thought our conclusion reflected the way that number 1 has been written. I thought that was our conclusion to that discussion. So I thought number 1 was fine.
Okay. All those in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? That motion.
Abstains.
Oh, yes. The next item is the consent calendar.
Yes, Madam Chair. Today's consent calendar. Item A, at 801 Garden Street was final approval with conditions. Item B, 834 State Street was final approval with conditions. Item C, 130 East Carrillo Street was final approval as noted. Item D, 350 Chapala Street is final approval with conditions. Item E, 632 State Street was final approval as noted. Item F at 2300 Garden Street was final approval as noted. And item F, those were reviewed by Commissioner Sharp with the exception of item F, which was reviewed by Chair Naylor, and item, I have it on yours.
I didn't review F.
Or no, item F was reviewed by Commissioner Adams, and item B was reviewed by Chair Naylor.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to that if I could.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? That motion carries. Next item are announcements or requests by applicants for continuances, withdrawals. And I think I have a announcement from a city staff member.
Actually, I've got some announcements, but Mr. Aguilar had come in to speak to something not on the agenda, and he was just coming up and asking me when he should speak when you were
that's why I
asking
missed
for
that
those.
public
So,
announcement thing.
yeah. So why don't we make announcements and then we'll open up public comment again. Okay. And you have some. Okay, very good. Commissioners Curtis, Murray, and Peugeot will be absent today. And we have a new brochure. I had one. I was going to hold it up. The Creeks Division has produced a new brochure titled A Homeowner's Guide to Managing Stormwater, and it contains valuable information on reducing stormwater flows and water pollutants from residential lots. So this brochure is available online, and also they have them at the Planning and Zoning counter. And then the new EPB design guidelines are printed and now available at the Planning and Zoning counter, $15 per book, and I will distribute your copies to you when you're ready to go home today. And then I believe Mr. Jacobitz has an announcement.
I just wanted to announce that there will be a regularly scheduled meeting of the HLC survey subcommittee and that'll be 2 Wednesdays from now on June 10th, 10 o'clock in the morning. Usual place, the Community Development Directors Conference Room. That's the small conference room on the second floor. That's here at 630 Garden Street. And the main subject that we'll be talking about is the potential list update.
Thank you.
That's at 10.
It's at 10.
Does anybody else have any announcements?
Yeah, my wife and I are working on the date for the summer party for HLC. We're probably going to hold it on a Sunday, and I will get back to my fellow commissioners on that date, and we'll try to make it so that we don't plan it on someone's vacation day.
Thank you.
Well, as you know, I'm not going anywhere.
And never does.
Madam Chair, I have a quick announcement. The book signing for the Santa Barbara Conservancy's Stone Architecture in Santa Barbara was postponed to the first Thursday in June, which will be June 4th. And the book signing is going to be held in the Casa de la Guerra courtyard opposite De La Guerra Plaza from 5 to 8 o'clock.
Thank you. Any other announcements or subcommittee reports? Oh, no, I'm sorry, that's next. There are no other announcements. We will go to subcommittee reports. It's been a quiet summer. Okay. Next are possible ordinance violations. If there are any, please fill out the appropriate paperwork and turn it in. And then I would like to open public announcements again, and if someone would like to wish to come up and speak.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Good afternoon. My name is Mark Aguilar with the City of Santa Barbara Redevelopment Agency, and I wanted to take this opportunity to inform you all that the historic rail car Santa Barbara is coming to town. It's coming in two parts. This Friday afternoon, we'll be seeing the wheels and axles show up on the rail. That's been expanded a little bit next to the Morton Bay fig tree. And then the body will come in the wee hours of Monday morning. And if I recall correctly, the impetus for this came back in 1998 when the railroad depot restoration was going through design review, and it was recommended by the HLC commissioners that it would be nice if we could get a static display of period rail car to help finish off the entire depot restoration. So it only took about 11 years, but it is coming. So I thought I'd inform you. Do you have any questions?
No.
Okay.
Is there going to be any sort of a ceremony welcoming it?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. We're planning to have, because when it arrives, it'll probably take another couple weeks to finish off the details. We're planning to have a ribbon cutting ceremony sometime in July, a dedication then. And I'll be sure to inform you all in advance when we schedule that.
Thank you. That's great follow-up.
It is 11 years. A very short time in terms of history.
But it didn't let it go, which is great. First item will be the archaeology report for 1235 Veronica Springs Road. Scan.
Madam Chair, Dr. Glassell reviewed the report and concluded that the archaeological investigation supports the report's conclusions and recommendations that because the project would not have potential to result in significant impacts on either prehistoric or historic archaeological resources, no mitigation measures are required.
Thank you. Are there any questions? No. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? That motion carries.
Mr. Sharp.
We now are 20 minutes ahead of time, so I think I will ask for a recess.
The microphone is...
It was being... I'm going to call for a recess of 15 minutes.
Pretty arduous so far.
I know.
Yeah.
Yesterday, just a photograph of yesterday, and all its edges folded, and the corners faded sepia brown, and yet it's all I have of our past love, a postscript to its ending. Brighter days, I can see such brighter days, when every song we sang is sung again, and now we know this time it's for good. Lovers once again, and you're near me. I can remember the rain in December, the leaves are brown on the ground. In Spain, I did love and adore you. The nights filled with joy were our yesterdays, and tomorrow will bring you near. Yesterday, I can say I get a kick every time they play that Spain again. I can remember the rain in December, the leaves are brown on the ground. Our love was a Spanish fiesta. The bright lights and songs were our joy each day, and the nights were the heat of yearning. I can recall my desire, every reverie is on fire, and I get a picture of all yesterdays. Yesterday, I can say I get a kick every time I see you gaze at me. I see moments of history. Your eyes meet mine, and they dance to the melody, and we live again as if dreaming. The sound of our hearts beat like castanets, and forever we'll know their meaning. I can recall my desire, every reverie is on fire, and I get a picture of all our yesterdays. Yesterday, I can say I get a kick every time I see you gaze at me.
Hi, my name is Mark Winke, the architect. Not really. I think it speaks for itself, and I've never done this before on this. It's kind of a historic landmarks.
Staff would like to make a comment.
They're very fierce. I did notice when reading it, there's no historic merit to it, so I guess that was a good thing.
Madam Chair?
I'm going to ask for public comment, or would you
Usually staff makes the comment first, and then we're going a little bit backwards. With your indulgence? Okay. Madam Chair, once again, another report prepared by Fermina Murray. Very well documented. The photographs are just wonderful. It's like having a site visit in your hand. I really appreciate when I get her reports. This is the old Mom's restaurant building. I asked for the report because I thought it might have some significance. Basically, the report determined that the building has been so altered over time that there's not enough of the original structure left to really find that it has historic significance. And that has nothing to do with the brightly colored painting, which appeared much later. So staff has read the report. I agree with the conclusions, recommendations in the report. And with that, Madam Chair, I pass it to you for your discussion.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to Commission discussion.
I have a question. What's going to happen to the mom signs?
We're trying to reincorporate that into the project.
Really? I
I think
think
there's
that's
one
great.
or two of them. There's at least one of them.
There's
There's
one on
two.
either side
Yeah,
of the
right.
main. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
The new design's moving a little more forward from this, and it's going to hopefully incorporate them into a playful area. Although I don't think they're legal anymore.
No, they're not.
Yeah.
I don't know, they never were.
It's true.
Yeah, they're backlit signs, which means that they wouldn't be permitted today. But the fact that they've been there, and if there's a sentiment that they should have, a remembrance of the original building by having them incorporated somehow, and perhaps they can be incorporated into the site when not necessarily facing the street.
Maybe more recessed.
Are there any more questions from the commission? If not, I'll go to comments.
report was really great. I, again, especially enjoyed the photographs, and I like the idea of a plaque, I believe, was suggested. So I thought that was a good thought.
Is there any additional comments?
I first have a comment, and then I'll make a motion to accept the report. My comment is I think the proposed structure looks like a nice, simple, quiet building, and I appreciate that. So my motion then is to accept the structures report for 421 East Coda Street.
I'll second that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? That motion carries. Report for 1330 Chapala Street. If you'll introduce yourselves to the record.
Yes, Alexandra Cole, preparer of the report.
Lisa Plowman, Piker Group, Planning Manager.
Thank you.
Hi.
Staff like to say something?
I just wanted to make, is this on? Yeah. Make a few comments. I'm Melissa Hedrick, the environmental analyst for the city. For this report, the report focuses a lot on the impacts of the project on a neighboring historic resource. And I know that Deborah Andaloro has spoken with you all about those issues before, and I just kind of wanted to reiterate a couple points from that. In order for an adjacent project to have a significant CEQA impact to a historic resource, the impact really has to be direct. So a change in view per se would be relevant as it relates to community compatibility and the design guidelines in the area and the city's policies. But from a CEQA perspective, the impact would only be significant if it directly impacted the historic, the part of the historic resource that was significant. And so when you are looking at this report and its different findings, it's good to distinguish between your CEQA findings and your policy findings. So a potential finding you might have on the report
if you go this way, would be to say that you could agree with the report's findings of less than significant when it comes to CEQA, but not agree with potential policy or design review concerns, including views and other aspects of the project. And so I would encourage you guys to distinguish between CEQA significance and policy consistency when you're reviewing the report.
Are there any questions regarding this statement or explanation? I have a question. In approving or disapproving the report, what is the relevance of either finding?
In approving the report right now concentrates on the CEQA aspect of the project. The report's findings will play into your consideration of the project when it comes to design review. And so if you are concerned about that, you can definitely put on the record concerns you have about its policy consistency, because obviously the potential impacts to views and other aspects of the historic resource are relevant and should be discussed in here. But the CEQA findings is really the main goal of this report right now. But it does play into both decisions, and so that's why I would encourage that if there is some disagreement with the report at all, to distinguish what aspect you don't agree with, either the CEQA findings or the report's conclusions regarding compatibility and views.
So I'm not 100% clear. I think what I was asking was, are you saying that we can only disapprove or approve based on CEQA findings, but we may not approve or disapprove based on policy findings, and those can only be made as recommendations, the policy findings?
Right now you are reviewing the CEQA findings of the Historic Structures Report. You can give the applicant guidance based on what you're seeing in here, recommendations for future design review and policy, but right now you are making a decision on the report's findings as it's concerned with CEQA.
Does the Commission understand the distinction, therefore?
Madam Chair, may I make a...
Okay. Well, no, I'd rather not, because now I'm asking questions.
I think I might be able to help clarify for her. That was all.
Oh, well, do those Commissioner members who don't understand, would they like further clarification?
Yes, please. Sure. I think what Melissa is saying is that this is a CEQA document. It's assessing whether or not the project has an impact on the historic resource that's present on the site. There are other matters that relate to design that aren't being reviewed today but are still relevant to the overall approval of the project. And so if you have comments about consistency with design guidelines or whatnot that relate to the design, that will come up in the subsequent review on the design when the project comes back before the HLC. But you can make comments that direct the. We're not noticed to talk about the design today.
Right.
So what she's saying is that those comments are really reserved for the point in time where that comes back.
Right.
Okay, well,
but I did want to, if you are having concerns that your conclusions about the CEQA aspect of it might lead to conclusions further down the line that you don't agree with, that you could clarify right now that this is only for CEQA purposes, and that a finding on design is
different.
Yeah, is different, and it will come at a different time.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
This is exceedingly unusual. We usually accept or do not accept a report based on the project as a whole, and all of a sudden we're being boxed into this. I just don't understand.
I'll let Mr. Limon jump in. I think he has something to say.
Yes, I think that we're not trying to put limits on your review today. I think what we want to explain to you today is that we have had discussions previously about if you disagree with the conclusions of the report, if you accept the report but disagree with the conclusions, that's a bad thing to do. That you can there are two decisions being made: the CEQA decision And do you agree with that conclusion in the report, that it doesn't rise to a significant impact? We're suggesting that it does not, that CEQA decision can be made and you can accept the report. Now, that's totally different than, do you agree on whether the project design is acceptable? That decision will come to you at a later point, and you can bring forward design concerns about that on aesthetic and guideline. There's plenty of guideline basis to say this project is too large, it's too tall, it impacts the views. There is a basis to say that. So what we don't want you to feel is that because you, let's say, do not accept the project at this point in design, that somehow you feel compelled not to accept this report. You're not boxing yourselves into any decision other than to say, do you agree on the CEQA significance? And that's why we brought our EA today, to make sure that if there was this sentiment that you didn't want to accept the report, that you understood that you're saying it's a significant impact. And that's difficult to do when the resource itself is not being touched. It's being impacted to the degree of blockage, view blockage. And you can get there with other means and tools available if you so choose.
Ordinarily, if we accept a report, that's based on what is going to happen on the site.
No, that's not correct, Louise. What we're suggesting to you is that you're just making a CEQA determination. That's the process. You're saying it's not a CEQA issue.
I understand CEQA, but
well, if you understand that, then you're not committing yourself to approve the project. And that's what we're trying to explain today. That the project can't come back.
That certainly is not the way we've always worked.
Well, typically they go hand in hand. But in this case, there's a specific concern, and we're saying, does it rise to a significant level? And this report concludes that it does not. And if you disagree with that, you're welcome to do that, but you have to indicate why you do that on a CEQA level. And I think that's what we were trying to explain to you. There are other policies to disagree on that.
So unless it actually touches the building, there's no problem. Is that what you're saying, even though it totally impacts?
The way that the CEQA guidelines read are that the project would have to substantially materially alter the part of the historic resource that is significant. So,
The whole building
how
is
you
an historic
define
resource.
materially alter is where the discretion is. But in previous case law, that has been a pretty direct and large impact. Like an example of a case I can think of was a school property that was deemed historic, and a new building was actually going on the grounds of the historic landscaping of the property was being removed. So that was deemed a significant historic impact because the actual historic nature of the project, the landscaping, was being materially altered. I do not know of any cases offhand right now of impacts where it involves views or something more indirect. And that just might be a limit of case law at this point, but in case law up to this point, significance is, the threshold is really more direct impact.
Well, it's very interesting. We have these compatibility things here in our...
But those are the policy that she's making the distinction between CEQA and policy, so we may act on those policy guidelines, absolutely.
Even if we accept the report.
Right, exactly.
That's correct. And Ms. Boucher, I think we're going to expect you to have specific comments directed to the Planning Commission on this project, specific to whether you feel it's consistent with your guidelines and policies. And you can make that direct comment and direction on the project based on those comments.
A good conclusion might be that if you do have concerns on the policy end, to say that there is some kind of impact here, but that it doesn't rise to the level of significance for CEQA, and that further review from a policy and design perspective is needed in the future.
I have two questions. One is, I understood that setting is actually a CEQA determination. If it affects the setting, that is a CEQA finding.
That is true as it relates to community compatibility. Again, the threshold is very high for that. So an example of a project in case law that has reached the level of significance with community compatibility is putting like a Walmart next to a single family house. Like that's the one example I can think of. It is a pretty high threshold for change in a community. And yes, definitely the community compatibility comes into play. That is a different issue than impact to historic resources. It comes into more of the visual resources and community compatibility area. But again, I would, from a CEQA perspective, the threshold is rather high for significance in that realm. But definitely with the design review criteria and the city's policies, outside of CEQA, you have a lot of discretion on those decisions.
And my second question was CEQA process. That is, if we were to find a CEQA finding on this report, would that basically engender an EIR?
If you were to find that the historic resource, that this project would have a significant impact to historic resources, yes, there would have to be an EIR on this project, and that would likely include a new historic structures report done by a peer review consultant and a full EIR and all that goes with that.
That's what I wanted to make clear to the commission members. You understand the point of the CEQA findings. Thank you. And are there any other questions, or is there still someone, misunderstanding or not sure about this explanation? I'll now open up to public comment. Is there public comment regarding this issue? I understand there was a letter sent by Mr. DeForest regarding this on behalf of the Pearl Chase Society, which was in opposition to the acceptance of this report. We have received the report or the letter, and I believe everyone may have or should have read it. I will go to questions from the commission members.
I have a question.
Yeah.
And item 1 of the analysis on page 9, the discussion is basically the spatial relationships, and that the project is in keeping with the 1931 plan for the theater, which was to be the center of a full block of small shops. And I'm not exactly clear how this is small shops when they're not shops, for one, and small is something that you determine individually, I think, but I'm just not sure how that's reconciled.
All right. No, you're absolutely right. Excuse me. No, you're absolutely right, Craig, in that sense. They're not small shops. But from my point of view, the idea was that it was to be the centerpiece and that you could have buildings around it. And then looking at some of then they were also comparing it to a church in a village in Andalusia. And
Which
looking
is usually on the top of the hill.
Looking at these, thank you, Louise. The pictures that I saw were in all on the same level. The cathedral and the buildings, and some of those had the mixed taller ones in it. When I was analyzing, seeing what was relevant from my point of view about the architectural elements on that north side, for example, a lot of the decoration was up at the top, and that you'd still be able to see that, and so that's why. No, you're absolutely right. This is not small shops, but I was analyzing it in that sense.
Well, just to be clear, it wasn't to express opposition. It's just, did you see examples that were residential? Were there apartments? Were there small condominiums, that type of thing, that were in keeping with the spirit of the small shops? I mean, in other examples that you studied, was residential part of that analysis.
They were residential, but again, it was more urban. Again, it was Andalusia, but it was not rural Andalusia. It was urban.
Okay, thanks.
And this is urban too, although our architecture is normally based on rural.
Right.
Are there any other questions from the commissioners? Seeing none?
Madam Chair, I just also wanted to clarify that Mr. DeForest had submitted the letter asking you to reject the current plans. So I'm not sure if he was against the report as much as just the project in general. So just wanted to clarify. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll take comments.
I'm assuming that there will be verbal guidelines if I overstep the bounds in terms of CEQA. And
I think she's ready to jump on you. Okay.
so keep your microphone on.
Yes.
One of the things that struck me about the report was that spatial relationships were mentioned, but I don't think they were given nearly enough credit. I think the problem we've been dealing with in the past with the plans, I think here again also with this report, is that the spatial relationships are of primary importance, in my opinion. That anything that is done that blocks the Arlington, in my opinion, and it's particularly difficult because from Solar to Victoria Street, I don't know what the drop is, but it's significant. Down to the parking lot and then down through Vaughn's to Victoria. So the problem is anything built on Solar Street is going to block the view of the Arlington Theater. I don't know, I'm not an architect, so I don't know the way around it, but I think that the specific project effects should include the fact that there is no way to, as presented, there's no way that it will not have an adverse impact on anyone's view of the Arlington. I think that it's unavoidable at this point. So I think that the idea of the spatial relationship, which we've been treated to by this parking lot, which shows the Arlington in its full glory, is going to be tampered with visually, and of course the mountains will be eliminated entirely. Also, it's number 2. The historic character of a property shall be retained and preserved. The removal of distinctive materials or alteration of features, spaces, and spatial relationships that characterize a property will be avoided. Well, that it cannot be avoided as presented. The same thing holds true with changes to a property that have required historic significance in their own right shall be retained and preserved. It's all about, again, spatial relationships. The idea, I think, is that that I would like to see maintained is I don't know how it can be done, but to minimize the Arlington Theater, not to minimize the soaring architecture. One of the grand buildings in Santa Barbara, I think, is one of the 2 or 3 grand buildings in town. And then number 9, related new construction shall not destroy historic materials, features, and spatial relationships that characterize a property. Well, that seems to me to be, as I say again, unavoidable. So my comment would simply be I would hope that the report would emphasize more the unique spatial relationship that Arlington enjoys from that block of Chapala and that block of Solar Street.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you wish to comment?
Sure. I think it would be good to distinguish whether you think that adverse impact is significant or not when it comes to CEQA. Because I hear that you're saying it's an adverse impact. And so in thinking about that significance determination, again, the threshold is whether it materially alters the historic aspects or the significant historic aspects of the historic resource. So spatial relationships definitely factor into that. I think that when it comes to views, that is more of a policy, in the policy realm than in the CEQA realm.
But
So
that could be
if you want to just clarify maybe your comment.
That could probably be argued. I think that the idea that spatial relationships are consistent throughout the CEQA guidelines. They talk about these consistently. This is really what we're talking about, is spatial relationships, because it's one of those buildings that when it's skirted with smaller buildings, unless it's done very artfully, the impact that we have enjoyed of the Arlington Theater will be irretrievably lost.
True.
That's clear. So I think the impact is adverse, and I think it's major. That's my position.
Thank you. Mr. Adam?
I tend to agree that with Commissioner Drury on this. I think throughout these items, these standards that. Especially item 2 and item 9. Again, spatial relationships is and is intended to be part of this sort of CEQA review, and I feel like the impacts aren't acknowledged. And I'll just say that Commissioner Drury is more articulate than I could be, but spatial relationships are character defining, and I just don't feel that the impacts in a CEQA definition have been addressed enough by this report, because those are adversely impacting the spatial relationships. Even though it doesn't touch the building, and we still have this language in here, and it's impactive of those spatial relationships.
Thank you. Mr. Sharp?
Thank you. I'm concerned about the view blockage and the density, as I've stated many times with respect to this project. I feel, in looking at number 2, that we are removing and altering spatial relationships that include view blockage that characterize this particular project, and I really believe that the project as proposed does rise to the level of significant visual impact on one of Santa Barbara's most important historical resources.
Thank you. Madam Boucher?
I think I've made my position pretty clear on this.
All right. I'll just say you agree.
Yes, I would agree with Mr. Sharp.
Mr. Schallenberger?
Yes, just in all fairness to the applicant, the state of California may not have the same definition of the word significant as we do locally. So I'm not sure that the report is inaccurate. I think the report is accurate that it does meet the CEQA guidelines, that the findings of not a significant impact, I think, are correct in the state's definition, of CEQA's definition. So whatever our feelings are locally, I just think it would be unfair to the applicant to tell them that their report was inaccurate or incorrect or not meeting the level of, not meeting the guidelines of CEQA. So I'm tending to want to accept the report and still reserve our local definitions for the design review process. The report, I think, is accurate, and I wouldn't want to say otherwise.
Thank you.
I really appreciate the report on the landscape. I think the preparer of the report did a fantastic job looking at the site trees and landscaping. Her analysis of that is just really quite excellent. So I do want to make that comment. And then as far as the spatial relationships, I think that not only it might affect visual relationships, but it could also affect climate-related relationships. There's a lot of verticality to what we have seen before, and I think it's going to change the climate in certain areas, the sun being able to penetrate certain areas. So.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Let me just make one point of clarification. Right now, we're really focusing on the impacts to historic resources and the spatial relationships of the character-defining aspects of the historic resource and how they are impacted. Definitely factor into the significance determination as it relates to the state. Views of the resource under the state threshold, CEQA thresholds, has, at least in previous case law, not risen to the level of significance. So the views of a historic resource and the impact to those are more of a policy city-related issue. Impacts to the historic resource, again, really have to be direct, and that impact can be a spatial related to spatial relationships, but it would have to be an impact directly to the spatial relationships of the character-defining features of that historic resource. So I just wanted to clarify that.
I understand. Mr. Jacobus?
Where to start? Just to try and put that into a little bit of perspective, if you look at preservation, historic preservation as a whole, you've got a building that's on the National Register, and somebody comes along and they own the building, they want to demolish it and build condos or whatever. The worst thing that happens to you is your building gets taken off the National Register. All the teeth in historic preservation is in local ordinances. So it's our local ordinance, if we're going to be having these kind of issues more and more as the city starts to densify, we may need to be actually looking at our own ordinance and what we can do to strengthen our ordinance to protect, if we want to protect views of historic resources. So that's just one point I wanted to make. And something else that Mr. Schellenberger had hit on page 9, very top sentence, it says the proposed project is in keeping with the 1931 plan for the Arlington Theater, which was to be the center of a full block of small shops. Again, right before that, it talks about spatial relationships, and I'm having difficulty accepting that statement as being a true statement. So if we are to accept the report, I'd like to ask that statement be stricken from the report.
Thank you. I will try to summarize this, and please, Commission members, let me know if I have altered your thinking or recommendations in any way. The majority of the commissioners believe that, in fact, there's an adverse impact in terms of CEQA because there's an adverse impact to the spatial relationships that actually are a character-defining aspect of this landmark building. In addition to this, they are making future policy findings that will affect their future thinking with regard to view blockage and spatial relationships, and this does not affect our approval or disapproval of the report. I will entertain a motion.
May I ask a question? If we move to accept the report, it does not mean we want to accept this. We can accept the report with reservations. Is this correct?
You can accept the report. I would encourage you to only accept the report if you agree with the findings of the report that the impacts are adverse but not significant. If you feel that they are CEQA significant, sorry. If you feel that they are significant with regard to CEQA, I would encourage you to not accept the report, and knowing that either an EIR is down the road or some project changes.
Right.
I move not to accept the report.
I second that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Abstain? That motion carries.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I didn't hear how you voted.
I vote with majority. Thank you. Next item is consideration of intent to hold a public hearing.
I want them to do this. I want them to take that and get it down. Get rid of the third floor.
They've got to get rid of the third floor.
That's what I want them to do.
Okay, Madam Chair. What I'm requesting of you today is we had a meeting of the designation subcommittee last 2 weeks ago, and they've agreed to put forward a proposal to designate 1809 Stanwood Drive, the Flores Casita, as a city structure of merit. And so what I need to do is set a date for that. The applicant has asked specifically for the date of June 24th, 2009. So what this resolution is simply a resolution of intent to hold a public hearing to consider the structure of merit designation of 1809 Stanwood Drive on assessor's parcel number 021-143-005. This would be resolution of intention 2009-1. And it would take effect May 27th, which would be today, and it would essentially resolve that the Historic Landmarks Commission adopts a resolution of intention to hold a public hearing on June 24th, 2009, to consider designation of the Flores Casita located at 1809 Stanwood Drive on assessor's parcel number 021-143-005 as a City of Santa Barbara structure of merit. So this is not the actual designation. This is simply agreeing on a date to hold the hearing. And like I said, June 24th has been requested by the applicant, and it works fine for staff. And there will be a number of you here, so we should be good.
So I'll make a motion to, excuse me.
I just had a question quickly. I don't understand this process. I mean, in other words, why couldn't we just put this on? Couldn't staff just put this on the agenda? Why does there have to be a resolution of intention?
Because the ordinance that was written by the city attorney's office is part of this step. There's a multi-step process, and this is one of the things that we need to do. Is it's just to make sure that there is due process, and to make sure two things. One is that if an applicant is wanting to be heard, it doesn't slip through the cracks because we've got a bunch of checks and balances to make sure we're moving on. It's also designed to make sure that we move in a timely manner. Because normally, they specifically asked for June 24th, so I put that into the resolution. Normally, we'd put a 60-day window on there, and within that 60 days, we would hold it. But in this case, they've asked specifically for June 24th, and yet it's in the ordinance. And I know sometimes it seems complicated and paper-laden, but that's essentially a structure of merit. When we hold this hearing on June 24th, if you all vote a majority to designate it, then it becomes designated, and that's the end of the process. If it were a landmark designation, then we'd actually go in front of City Council in addition to your review.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution of intention.
I'll second that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? That motion carries.
This evening.
Yes.
Do you know when the hearing is? 24th?
It'll probably be up near the front. Usually right after the reports would be a place where we'd put the hearing. So that way we don't have people waiting around for hours upon hours to be heard. We may have members of the public that would want to come and speak to that.
The next item is 1221 State Street.
Good afternoon.
Will you introduce yourself for the record? And
My name is Ed Lenbick, representing Mr.
I don't think your mic is on.
make that bright green. Oops. And did you? Thank you.
Ed Lenbick, representing the property owner, SEMA Management Corporation. Here are 3 sets of drawings.
And while we're doing that, I will read the comments from the last meeting. It was continued 2 weeks with the following comments. The concept of the use of the security gate is supportable in view of safety issues. The shape, height, and material of the proposed gate are not appropriate. It should be more traditional in style and proportion. It should be better integrated with the large building. Solid stock should be used rather than tube steel. The loss of Paseo views is of concern. Therefore, the closed gate should be used. The gate should be closed after hours.
Last week, the concerns that you addressed were that
You may want to pull that mic a little closer.
we had gates which were had a arch top on them, and the low point was at 6 feet. And you felt that was, or some members of the board felt that was not an appropriate shape for the gates. We also had columns making some of the one pair of the gates slightly smaller, and they were supported by 3-inch tube steel posts, and you said that tube steel is not appropriate. So we've made those changes. We have, I don't believe I brought the color along. We have a very dark black-green color selected for them. So it's relatively simple. Their gates are being placed at the 3 entry points to Victoria Court, and will be closed after security has done a sweep of the building late at night after the last tenants and guests have left.
Thank you. Do you have any other else?
No.
Do I have public comment?
The photos
There's no one there.
The photos are here, and some photo detailing is here as well. As you know, there are gates on the Paseo that's immediately adjacent to this that runs from the parking lot to State Street, and there are gates also on 1029 State Street, a block, 2 blocks down.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
I was under the impression that you had to have some panic device on gates. The security guy could easily miss somebody who's asleep in an upstairs office. I'm very surprised that you can permanently lock gates and not provide the necessary screening around all that stuff that becomes a problem.
That's the case at 1129, and on the project next door.
Is that just because you have a means of area of refuge within the courtyard or something?
Numerous areas
Right.
of refuge. But, I mean, as you know, the post office is here. As I mentioned last time, the post office has an open door all the time, there and there. I'm not about to judge the client's wishes.
No,
whatever. Also, there's a restaurant bar on the second floor. So this may not be closed up until 2, and it's opened up at 8. There are exits obviously out of those other places. But again, that's their desire. They've had broken windows.
That's a building department issue and not HLC issue, of course. Just curious.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
3/8 or 5/8? The solid stock.
5/8.
5/8.
Any other questions? Comments? This is here for,
I hope it's here for final.
well, you are agendized for concept.
If the agenda also says action may be taken if sufficient information is provided, and that is a tip that the environmental assessment is complete. So if you think the drawings are complete enough, you can go ahead and approve it today.
Okay.
There must be something we can do here.
Do I have comments regarding this project?
I have one.
Yes.
I think that the bottom panel, as you see here, being 6.5 inches, is a little puny for the massiveness and the size of the gates, and it could easily be increased to 10 to 12 inches with the clavos as shown and necessary adjustments in the height of the crossbar.
Those are cutouts.
Oh, it's a cutout? Not
Yeah, those are
either
all
way.
cutouts.
Either way.
Okay.
Just, I wasn't here 2 weeks ago, so I had not seen it before now, but it just seems as though it should be more than 6.5 inches.
It'll read as 9.5. because of the 3-inch gap at the bottom. I mean, it's intended to meet handicap requirements. But it can be made higher. You choose.
Well, I'll never see these gates closed, so it's not a big deal.
Yeah, exactly. You never see them closed.
You never know.
No, you never see them closed, exactly. But you can change that dimension if you
fall
want.
asleep.
The cost will be the same. It's,
Yeah, yeah.
it just would be a little more hefty and.
Okay.
Are there any other comments?
I like the every other twist idea, and I think the color is perfect, right on. So, I like the color, and I like the general shape. There's more transparency to it than before.
Thank you. Well, then the overall comments are that we like the overall design, it's acceptable, and there are some fine points which we appreciate, and that we would request that the proportion of the bottom rail be closer to 10 inches as opposed to 6.5. And I would guess ask for a motion for final and consent.
There.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries.
Thank you.
So you said final on consent. So what's the motion for today?
Oh, preliminary with final and
Preliminary
consent.
and continued 2 weeks?
Sure, I want to be back
Okay.
as soon as possible.
No, consent on.
Oh, consent.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And I don't see Mr. Whitosh. I will recess for 5 minutes.
I did.
Thank you.
See you.
See you Friday.
Yeah.
Ed? Oh, just one person, leave a sheet.
energy bars?
Oh, are they dispensing energy bars now at meetings?
They used to.
They were, but
Before the cuts took
the
place.
city budget
And we
is,
used to get paid.
yeah,
That's gone.
It's just a rotten world now.
yeah, right.
That's why we're so mean.
But I think that they have brought the level of snacks to a level of insignificance.
Is that a sequel recommendation?
Should we turn the mics on?
They are on.
Oh, they were on?
If you would introduce yourselves
Yes.
for the record.
That one is not.
Howard Witosh, architect.
Wait.
Greg Young.
Start over.
Greg Young.
There it is.
The light's on.
Hi,
That one was on.
I'm Howard Witosh, architect. Greg Young, building owner. We're here to take a look at the storefront remodel at 418 State Street. You've seen this once before, but I don't think you've seen it, and I don't think
I've seen it.
Robert, you have seen it.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Okay. So we added some details that were not on the plans before. This group right in here, which shows how the archway is created and how the columns at the end, at each end, these columns here, are installed, and this is the elevation of that. We also added ceramic urns on a little tile pedestal, and we have some additional colors to show you. This description here indicates the plants that are proposed to be in the urn, and there's a little grade planter on two sides that wraps around this octagonal base. These are the proposed materials for the two urns. These are the colors for the proposed colors for the storefront. And there's some indications where these go. We were directed last time to study the arch and to make it less. Could I ask the?
I'm going to read the minutes,
Thank you
the
very
motion.
much.
The motion was continue 2 weeks with the following comments. Number 1, the concept is supportable and a great improvement. Number 2, study the overall integration of the entire facade and the arches. The frame appears to be over-accentuated. The space between the arch and the frame and the roof is too large and begs for something to be done with it. And planters should be integrated into the design.
I think that's correct. I remember that. So we did a few little things. This is the revised illustration. These are the details that have been added. Let me look at these if you like. And this is a field measurement that I made December 7th, 2007, which indicates the size of the various moldings.
Mr. Witosh, can you put that under the center a little more so it's the camera?
I certainly can. Shall we move
Thank
this?
you.
Okay. Yeah.
See where it is by looking
I
at
think,
the screen.
yeah, this is, so one of the reasons why this little ear here comes out and becomes this frame, which goes all the way around the opening, is to in fact give these moldings at the top and bottom, a place to run into. Furthermore, this is not all one plane. This is the original plane here. This line actually should be a dotted line and represents the outline of the walls inside the building. So this is really not seen on the exterior. So this surface here is the original existing exterior arch and lintel. This infill here basically is a rough stucco, heavy dash, sand colored, that basically rolls into the arch. The arch is a painted, striped piece of plaster. And then these columns, these arches rest on the columns. The columns are splits vertically, and they half split on each end, and then the two splits in front and back. The bollards and chains, these are heavy chains and steel pipe bollards with a little ball finial. and they essentially keep the tables inside. We did not want to replace the bollard with an urn. We wanted to keep the urns inside for many reasons. One is security. So that's how we responded to the comments.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on this? Seeing none, we'll take back to questions from the commission.
Any thoughts how the plants in the urn and the at-grade portion are going to be watered? Will it be hand-watered or otherwise?
Lots of thoughts. Consulted with Cunningham Arcadia Studio, and so we're going to have a little water pipe that goes in and essentially feeds the two planters, goes up into the urns, and actually bubbles into the urns as well. So that's part of it. You don't see that in the at this stage.
Great.
But that's part of the plan.
Any other questions? I have a question. I'm sorry if I really kind of lost track there. My question is why, are you saying this is existing?
No.
This frame around the arches?
No, this is not existing. This is a frame that essentially bridges the gap between the original construction, which is concrete with plaster over it, and this construction here, which is pipe and frame. Mm-hmm. And so there is going to be a movement there, and so we thought we would make that, accomplish that without having a cracking problem.
Mm-hmm. So you're essentially saying that you can do nothing about this expanse, which was the comment.
I was
looking for a response to the comment.
We added a small address numerals incised into a slab of stone, which is let into the plaster. That's how we give it just a little feeling up there.
And I remember this as a comment not necessarily reflected here, that the distance between this frame and this arch was really not something that we wanted to see.
I wanted you to see how they really do it.
How they?
They. Those people here. No distance. No distance. No distance. No distance. It happens. I did not bring the pictures of those instances where they do have a gap, but I did bring the pictures of those places where they don't. And I believe that it's fair to say that this occurs in this type of architecture. It's not wrong. These are also tiled surfaces, and these are all in the same plane here, so you don't get this kind of bumping out and bumping in that with heavy frames and so forth that you see in other places. It's very subtle. There are some little reveals around the edges. This is a reveal in here, and there is a reveal in here, arch and so forth. So without just totally doing an Adobe Photoshop thing where you just drag it over and just copy it, we tried to adapt it to the circumstances.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I like those photographs because they do illustrate something. The space made by that more elevated angle is far different than the space made by this rather, it doesn't seem, I was going to say weak. That doesn't sound quite right. It doesn't seem to be as significant a space between the right angle corner and the curve as it does there. Those things are true. They hold their place as an architectural feature. And I was. Shall I save that for comments? I expect
Yes.
I
shall. Are we done with questions? And we will go. Oh, we do. Okay.
So this is a rougher textured plaster, correct?
Yes.
At the arch
Right.
and above the arch. But what about the plaster that's being painted by the banding?
Smooth.
So that'll be a change texture when you go
Yes.
from paint
Right.
to field. Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
And the detail shows that, points that out.
I have a question.
Yes.
You're not going to make any kind of breakups in the windows? I'm not talking about little squares, but
Breakups?
in the glass of the.
Oh, there. It's a pretty busy storefront with a lot of, those are all what do you call it, folding doors and the exit doors. And so we thought that the idea of this storefront, notwithstanding the sash and frame and all that, was transparency. And to be able to see in and also to see out and to see these arches from the inside as well. So we made them substantial in the sense of holding the glass and attaching them to the frame, but did not want to further divide the glass up into smaller.
No, I didn't mean into a lot of little.
Do we see them being normally open?
The folding doors in the center probably will be open, yes. The idea is that this is a continuation of the dining area inside.
None on rainy days.
Any further questions? I have a question. I'm looking at the proportion of these arches, the narrowness and the height, and I don't see it reflected in these. And so my question is, did you ever consider having two mediating?
I would be
Posts.
lying if I said we did not consider that.
And the reason you didn't do it
Well,
was?
the reason is that the function of the business is both a retail and a restaurant. So it is basically two major functions. That we wanted to somehow have the two openings be one address the restaurant possibly, and the other one address the retail, and by the same token to reduce the number of obstructions in the storefront. If we had three arches, they probably would be more akin to these photographs. However, functionally, we took the liberty, and I suppose that's kind of a wrong, politically incorrect word now, but we stretched the arches, still maintained curvature, but we stretched them to put one column in the middle, and that was architectural variation on a theme, I would say. Again, taking liberties. So, see.
Any other questions? Not, I'll take comments.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
Howard, in your photo sim here, you've got a rather graceful parabolic, whatever it is, arch coming down that more mirrors a normal one. And then in your exterior elevation, it's a tight radius that terminates immediately. So this does not reflect to that. Had you thought about lowering these columns to be able to get more of a graceful arch within the confines of the area you have to work?
I did do that. The columns come 7 feet, but this spiral portion can be cut to any height. So we lowered them to 6'8", and a lot of that had to do with getting below this line here. Yes.
Could they be 6 feet?
You know,
for
they
instance?
could. If the Capitol is at 6 feet, you and I probably would hit our eyes there. You know, that would turning the corner. It would be something that would be at the height of your head. So I gave it a door height. However, the comment that you make is applicable. These appear to be they are an arch. They're just a flatter arch.
Much.
They're very different. Yeah, it's not a. This is a one arch, and then it transitions.
No, I
to
understand,
a tiny
but
one, so.
the photo is acceptable in my eyes.
What did he do?
Having that come down to a vertical really gracefully, and then traveling a bit. Here, the radius just, boom, stops right on top of the Capitol, and I think that's part of why you get that squished look. Part of it.
Yeah. So in other words, if we can drop the column and maybe increase the radius at the top?
Yeah, it's essentially flat 3/4 of the distance, where these never are. They're flat maybe half the distance or about. So if this was more graceful, I think you could get a more graceful arch. But, there's formulas for all that, so it's easy to figure it out. To make it look rich and
There is a
acceptable.
point at which this becomes so much of an arch that you lose the point at the top.
That was the reason for lowering the beginning.
Normally, this is not a dialogue during comments.
excuse me.
Thank you. So may I have next other comments, please?
Well, he's an alumni, so he has special privileges.
Okay. Mr.
It's highly
Jacobus?
unusual, but I do have something I'd like to add. I meant to bring my Addison Meisner book. I've got several books on Addison Meisner. And I know we had some discussion last time about this thin band around the arches. That's actually historically accurate in terms of how Moorish architecture was handled in this country. I know that that's, you're looking at something, a different grade of architecture. And so when I see this wide band, it tends to take it away. And if this continues another week, I'll remember to bring that book in so I can show you examples. Oftentimes this little band had like a little spiral engraving in it also to just give it a little bit of shadow work. But touching, so it looks odd to us because we don't see a lot of Moorish arches in Santa Barbara, but touching the top of the arch exactly like that, the width of space above it, the way it kind of feels like it's crowding the arch, that's actually historically accurate. And so I would just like to possibly get you all thinking in that direction rather than this wide band, which I think would be a big mistake, but just passing my information along.
Thank you.
And if you'd like me to bring in that book, I'll bring it in next time.
Comments?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Drury.
For me, it's about those little, that one place that it touches, where the arch touches. What is it possible, and also the space above it to the roof line, where the address block is, right? What if you lifted, as opposed to lowering? What if you lifted that top of the arch 6 inches, and gave those arches permission to join and actually be viewed as a separate entity? Because they would be allowed to come to a point, and I think it would take care of also the space above, which I don't think needs a whole lot of tweaking. It just needs something. It needs to be a little bit smaller, in my opinion.
This space needs to be
That space
smaller.
up there, yeah. I don't have any objections to the width, as Mr. Jacobus pointed out. Especially if that's traditional Moorish, I don't have any objections to the width of that decorative molding above the arch. I just think it could be moved up to allow those arches to breathe on their own. Thank you.
Further comments?
I'm sorry.
Oh, just landscape-wise, I really like this urn approach. I think it's very nice. I looked at the plant list, and the plant list for the urns, I would skip the ivy. That gets invasive, kind of messy. I'd go with the other plants. I think that the cordyline, which is actually the cordyline you mentioned, there's a slight spelling error there, but cordyline, C-O-R-D-Y-L-I-N-E versus I. But anyway, that's a great choice for the urn, and I really appreciate you including the urn. So I think that's coming along nicely. I think it's perfect for this project.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes, go back to.
I didn't say this last 2 weeks ago, and I didn't say it today, and I should. I think this is a great improvement, by the way, on what exists, and I think it's going to be an attractive addition to Lower State Street.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Adams, did you want to comment about the architecture or not? No?
No,
Okay.
I think I agree with Commissioner Sharp's comment that I think the radius needs to come in a more graceful way to the support column.
Thank you. Madam Boucher.
As the Landmarks Commission liaison to the sign committee,
Yes.
I would just like to point out that I don't know, are these going to be two separate businesses?
Not initially.
Okay.
This is the one right here. He is the one and the same.
Okay, I'm glad to know that.
Yeah.
The reason I brought it up is where you've placed the address. is probably exactly where someone's going to want to put a sign.
Signs right here.
No, but they usually want to have one on the wall that can be seen from across the street. But maybe the architecture is enough signing. I mean, it's
We were
great.
hoping to follow the idea, the notion that to build on the hillside rather than on the hilltop.
Well, I agree with you totally. Frank Lloyd Wright, right?
Okay. Yes, Mr. Schallenberger.
Okay, I'll just say it. I'd rather see the bands be in tile than paint.
These guys.
Yeah. That's all.
No comments about the arch or anything else?
No, I think it's a great project. I really like it a lot. It's just, that one thing.
Thank you. I will add my support of the comment regarding the shape of the arch. I think the drawing, as is shown in the drawings, is not acceptable. And I think whoever did the rendering got more of the feeling of probably where we want to go. So I'm going to summarize the comments. We would like to recommend that you continue to play with the proportion of the posts in order to achieve a more graceful arch shape, if possible. There is a comment regarding more exploration regarding the area above the frame. We like the urn approach and would request you drop ivy from your plant list. And there is a suggestion that you look at the bands in terms of tile. My assumption would be that that suggestion would be, similar. In other words,
and
tiles like that.
not a mosaic, it would actually be the large tiles representative of the width that you're showing the bands and that type of height, that
Large format.
large format. It just seems like it would add a little to the overall arch.
I'm looking for I'll ask what motion somebody would like to make.
I'll move for preliminary approval.
Second.
And continue.
2-week continuance, Howard?
So with the comments.
I have a question for the Commissioner or Chairperson Naylor. Should we weigh in on tile versus painted bands? Do we need to offer that kind of direction now, or the archway, the space above?
Can I just chime in? The reason being is all of the examples proffered here were tile, and that's where that came from, and other examples that I've seen personally. So it's not a directive.
I understand. It's not unreasonable either. It's what your thought is.
Thank you.
And I'll ask you my opinion, which is I think the architect and the owner have heard and have seen how many people have said, and you're looking to give a majority or something like that, but I think I'd like to leave it up to the architect's discretion to explore the concept and then to decide what he thinks is best, because he's had previous, confirmation of the paint. And, yeah.
Fair enough. Thank you.
So the motion is for preliminary to come back in
2 weeks if we can.
2 weeks for final. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Thank you very much.
Thank you. These things, I have to give these back to Arcadia Studios, but this white changed a little bit. It's a little more.
It is a little brighter.
Right? It's a real white. So, you want to keep this?
The colors?
Yes.
Yes, I think because you're going to be coming back
Right. Do you have a board already somewhere?
Yes, I have one.
You want to exchange boards here? Swap boards? Also, I brought complete sets that have these first two, this page, and also AO changed. So if you want to have do you want one set that's correct? One set that's correct? This is yours? Okay, thank you.
And what were you saying about the sets?
This set, these are 3 sets, which have remember we talked about the 488 square feet, the credit, and then there's also to abate the code.
The designs that the commission reviewed today, are those the same?
This is the one.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, this is just
Thank
a complete set.
Great.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
One.
Just one.
Folded.
Yes.
Folded and
Yes. Sidewalk tile, our tile.
I believe you showed that, yes.
Okay. So I won't be bringing those again.
I will make.
Why not?
I'd like a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved. All right. Thank you all very much.
Aye.